commercial manner. And of course, it's a rather almost completely landlocked country, one should say. So, being able to import from Egypt was, at that time, their only opportunity.
But it can manage for a week, and that is when it's been promised it will have the gas supplies back. Without that, if the pipeline were to be sabotaged, what would Jordan do?
Well, I mean, they can probably manage for longer, because obviously they have a strategic reserve probably covering them for 3 weeks, and that will have to be replenished as it is being drawn. Of course, it will be expensive. So the longer it takes, it just means that Jordan has to be out in the market buying diesel and fuel oil at effectively spot prices. And
would that have to be trucked in rather than coming down a pipeline?
Well, they have import facilities around Aqaba, so they
could come in on tankers there.
It could come in on tankers. Some of it will be tracked in. Some of it is being tracked in to the refinery they have from Iraq, actually. They're importing around 10,000 barrels a day of crude oil from that source. So, I mean, they do have some refining capacity domestically, but, I mean, they would have to buy much of it from abroad, probably.
And what is Israel's dependence on Egyptian fuel?
Well, right now it is about 40%. It's just over 2 BCM, billion cubic meters a year. But it has been set to rise in the future. Some deals were actually signed in the last 6-7 months. But in the short term, they should be able to compensate for most of that through drawing up production at the Yam Tethys field, which is a mature field supposed only to last for another 2-3 years, perhaps. They could sort of boost the short-term production there, and of course they might have to use some refined products and derivatives at a cost, obviously, in order to cover any shortages. But it seems like we shouldn't expect any power shortages in Israel. At least they seem to be quite confident they can manage the situation in the near term.
Final thought: what would happen if the Suez Canal were to close, even if it were only temporarily? What would happen to fuel supplies for the bigger area?
Well, to be honest, we're not really thinking about a disruption risk globally right now, more of a dislocation risk. Tankers would have to go from the Middle East when moving westwards around Africa, which of course would add a few weeks to shipments. It would add costs for the longer time and longer charters. So we would see some delays. We would see a scheduling problem. Tankers would be in the wrong place in the world, etc., etc. That would even out over time. And right now, luckily, I suppose, for the global markets, inventories are very high in Europe and North America. So disruptions shouldn't really be expected. But of course, this whole situation, and especially this incident now with the pipeline, whether sabotage or not, will just increase I suppose the jitters going through the market when they reopen on Monday.
Samuel, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure you'll be on the programme again, so do help me with your surname. Did I get it hopelessly wrong?
It's Chishuk. No, it was quite good, actually.
Oh, Chishuk. I think I was there. Listen, it's your expertise we want, not my pronunciation, so thank you for coming on the programme. Samuel Chishuk.
Thank you so much.
We've got more on Egypt and what's happening in that country after the break, and we'll be live at our web desk to find out the very latest about online.
Home to a diversity of rare species, Latvia's pristine woodlands are a place of magic. But with a strained economy and an eager market, forests are rapidly perishing, and with them their inhabitants. People and Power investigates how 60% of Latvia's timber ends up on UK shelves with a questionable seal of approval. Latvia's pulp fiction, at this time on Al Jazeera.
He's taken stolen goods and he's now dumping them onto the world without any sort of consideration for consequences.
From people making the news.
If the North will be saved a lot of trouble, I think it is important that they should come together.
To those it affects.
We do accept that there was very bad mistakes made in our banking area.
Behind the headlines.
Most South Koreans are not interested in reunification.
Is the inside story. At this time on Al Jazeera.
Top stories for you here on Al Jazeera as the sit-in continues in Cairo's Liberation Square. Egypt's Prime Minister says the government is working just as it should. Ahmed Shafiq told state television that orders are being given not to obstruct people's right to express themselves. Jordanian officials are scrambling to rearrange power supplies after a gas pipeline exploded in Egypt. The head of Egypt's natural gas company says a gas leak was responsible and not sabotage, as had been suspected earlier. The pipeline also supplies 40% of Israel's needs.
Because the region is being battered by a perfect storm of powerful trends.
Hillary Clinton, US Secretary of State, warning of what she called there, yes, the perfect storm in the Middle East if reforms are not implemented. Well, we had other world leaders at the same summit, including David Cameron, the UK Prime Minister, talking about events in Egypt. It's not all he's been saying. Julie McDonald's in London. David Cameron's been talking about other matters too.
He certainly has, David. He's been using the conference and his speech earlier to get a few other things off his chest. Now, he launched an attack on multiculturalism in his country. Speaking at that security conference that David just mentioned in Munich, he warned that the idea was directly contributing to homegrown Islamist extremism. Now, echoing words of the German Chancellor Angela Merkel last year, he said that multiculturalism had failed in the UK, and he called for a, quote, muscular liberalism to challenge extremist views. He also argued that the UK needed a stronger national identity. Now, his words have angered some Muslim groups and comes as the far-right English Defence League is holding a major demonstration in Luton.
Under the doctrine of state multiculturalism, we've encouraged different cultures to live separate lives apart from each other and apart from the mainstream. We failed to provide a vision of society to which they feel they want to belong. We've even tolerated these segregated communities behaving in ways that run completely counter to our values.
And at 1500 hours GMT, we'll be live at that demonstration in Luton in the south of England. And that's being held, as we said, by the far-right English Defence League. Now, in Australia, it continues to feel the effects of one of the largest ever cyclones to hit the country. The giant storm first struck Queensland, but its tail is being felt thousands of kilometres away in the southern state of Victoria. Wild storms lashed the city of Melbourne, bringing destructive winds and flash flooding. More than 175 millimetres of rain fell in just a few hours, also inundating rural areas. Now, Australian opposition leader Tony Abbott has visited the cyclone-hit city of Townsville, that's in Queensland, as an aid convoy heads further north.
Life in Queensland is slowly returning to something like normalcy, and I'm pleased to say that the military convoy, which has been heading to Cardwell, has made it through Ingham, which is good news for all those people further north who are dependent upon that convoy for vital supplies.
There's been a fierce gun battle between Thai and Cambodian troops along a disputed border area. Now, it's unclear what sparked the clash, which came just after a ceasefire was brokered late on Friday. At least one Thai soldier was killed in the most severe fighting between the countries in years. An 11th century temple was damaged and thousands of people were forced to flee. Thai nationalists are pressuring their government to oust Cambodians from land near Cambodia's Preah Vihear temple. Now, tens of thousands of Serbs have gathered in central Belgrade in the biggest anti-government rally seen there for years. The protest was headed by the Serbian Progressive Party. That's a centre-right organisation formed from the Serbian Radical Party. Protesters are calling for early elections, higher wages and a crackdown on corruption. Opposition groups are also frustrated with what they see as a slow integration into the EU. Now, Russian politicians are debating whether or not to bury communist leader Vladimir Lenin. His embalmed body has been on display in Moscow's Red Square since his death in 1924. A recent poll indicates that many Russians support the burial of the former revolutionary leader. Others, though, are staunchly against that idea. Neve Barker has been gauging those opinions in Moscow.
Red Square, the heart of Russia, a venue for rock concerts, fashion shows and in the winter months a giant ice rink. But at this heart is also a graveyard where the great and good of the Soviet Union are buried. But no tomb is greater or grander than that of Vladimir Lenin.